Guys, here we are again. I am so excited to keep going in the Rocky franchise with you guys in the build-up to Creed 3 coming out on March 3rd. I've already talked about the original classic that won Best Picture in the year 1976. So if you fast forward 3 years later and Rocky 2 hits theaters, an idea of a sequel to a movie that was already so good and one of the greatest sports movies ever made, that whole idea sounds ludicrous. Like, you can't top the original. No way, no how. But in many ways, Rocky 2 succeeds on so many fronts. A lot of people could sit there and argue that Rocky 2 is better than the first one. But let's examine it more, shall we? And just in case you've never seen Rocky 2, I know there's a few of you out there who haven't, but just in case, I'm gonna be nice. This is a warning that there will be some spoilers in this video, just like there was in the original Rocky review here on my channel. So go back, watch Rocky 2, and then come right back. This pretty much picks up exactly where the first movie left off. Literally, the first 10 minutes of Rocky 2 are the exact same as the end of Rocky 1. And even though Rocky Balboa, once again played by Sylvester Stallone, lost his high-profile bout with the cocky world champion Apollo Creed, his Cinderella story has caught the national sports media's attention. And now he has the opportunity to capitalize on his sudden fame. But there's only one problem. The injuries Rocky sustained think that that's enough for him to retire from boxing for good. But Apollo Creed is still humiliated from nearly losing to some nobody, and he spends a good majority of this movie arrogantly goading his newfound nemesis into getting back into the ring for a rematch. And of course, as this Cinderella story goes, that rematch does take place in the Philadelphia Spectrum, Rocky's hometown. Now, I should also tell you that Rocky 2 is a heavy favorite in my household. This is my dad's favorite movie of the franchise, and he and I were talking about this earlier today. And there's just so many things that Rocky 2 gets so right. Out of the rest of the franchise, aside from both Creed movies, Rocky 2 feels most akin to the original than any other. And this does exactly what you want a big budget sequel to do, especially for a sequel to a movie that was already so critically acclaimed. Not only are the performances once again excellent, but this script written by Sylvester Stallone, who continued to prove that he was a great writer, in addition to being a director, because he actually took on that role for this project as well. But this is perfectly building on the relationships from the first one in meaningful ways. The drama all feels incredibly earned, and the sentimental moments are also incredibly earned. Case in point, Rocky proposing to Adrian. This is one of the sweetest moments of the entire franchise, if you ask me. And Rocky proposes to Adrian in the most Rocky Balboa way imaginable. It is so simple. He's taking her on a date to the zoo. They stop in front of the tiger exhibit of all places. And then he pops the question, "I was wondering if you wouldn't mind marrying me very much." God, just such a sweet moment. The ceremony, too, is incredibly small. They tell almost no one but their closest confidants about it. And again, just like the original Rocky movie, Adrian is there to give Rocky strength. Rocky is there to take Adrian out of her shell. And they wind up having a son in this movie, Rocky Jr., albeit with some complications, which gives the movie a lot more emotional pull. Adrian, unfortunately, has complications in the childbirth and goes into a coma for a while. And some people might argue that this is where Rocky 2 tends to meander when Adrian is in this coma. But again, it's these characters and the performances from Sylvester Stallone. Burgess Meredith is also, once again, really, really good in this movie. Burt Young as well also gets some great stuff. The performances and the characters really pull this second act over the top for me. And Stallone is also, once again, very endearing as our underdog hero, going from rags to riches pretty much. He's just spending his money so willy-nilly in this first act. And once he starts getting more fame and credibility in the public eye, he actually starts getting public endorsements, and he's actually getting jobs doing commercials. And a good chunk of this movie is him figuring out whether or not a life outside the ring actually works for him. He gets in front of the camera to do these commercials, and when it comes to acting, he's shit. Like, Rocky Balboa can't even read a cue card. And that leads to some really funny scenes in the early portions of this movie. But that also just goes to show you one thing. Rocky 2, I think, is considerably funnier than the original in every way. And it all comes down to great writing that realizes the characters so incredibly well. It's Apollo. Well, who else were you expecting? Well, I was hoping he wouldn't show. That press conference between Rocky and Apollo just might be my favorite part of this movie, unironically speaking. You really just feel the tension and the feud getting to an all-time boil. And Carl Weathers is really, really, really great in here. He is definitely humiliated and humbled by the whole experience of the original. And again, perfectly building on what we learned from the previous. Because a lot of people are calling him a phony. A lot of people are calling the fight fixed. And he wants another chance to prove himself. Not because he's a bad guy or anything, but it's because he has a big sense of pride and definitely some ego in there. But it's not enough to make you think, okay, this guy is a horrible person. I do not want to root for him in any way. And that was a very tricky thing I think Carl Weathers had to navigate in this sequel. God, how do I put this? He really had a tough task navigating that line between a likable antagonist and just an annoying, detestable villain. And he somehow finds a way to get just before that line in the middle, because he is still incredibly charismatic and very likable, as Apollo Creed should be. And that, my friends, is why I think he's the most interesting character in the franchise. Not just because of the performance, but because that character is arguably more interesting than the hero. Not to say that Rocky isn't interesting and you don't root for him, but you can certainly understand where Apollo Creed is coming from in a human light. And then when these two get to training and when they get into the actual boxing aspect of this movie, really freaking great. I will hold my hand up and actually argue that I think the training montage in Rocky 2 so much better than the first one. Not only do I think it's all edited together a lot more cleanly, but I also think the iconic Rocky run in Rocky 2 with Bill Conti's score blaring in the background, it is handled much, much better in this movie. Because if you look at the first one, Rocky's just running around all on his own, which certainly works. But then you look at the contrast of the run in Rocky 2, and you have all the kids that he was encountering playing baseball with in the streets of Philadelphia. They're all running after him, and they're all following him on this journey. And then you see the entire city of Philadelphia running behind him, practically. And the kids are singing along in the lyrics in the background, and Rocky's running up the steps, and they're all celebrating with him. Oh, it's so awesome, guys. And I also believe that the final fight and the outcome of said fight really does make a whole lot more sense with Rocky winning here, because Adrian is giving him the strength to win. So Rocky's not just fighting to prove himself, he's actually going for broke and going for the belt. And he actually does win the belt, and you have one of the most iconic ending lines to a movie of all time while he's holding the championship up. God, just a great feel-good movie in every way. Now, yes, you can certainly nitpick Rocky 2 until the cows come home. A lot of people might argue that, yeah, that opening 10 minutes is just Rocky 1 tacked onto Rocky 2 here. But you gotta remember that this is a movie that was made in the 70s when the internet didn't exist. Some people might not have experienced the first Rocky movie in the theaters, or better yet, they might not have even seen the original Rocky movie before going to Rocky 2, which is just crazy to think. But they gotta have a way to know what happens and the context and the antecedent beat before proceeding through this. So I'm gonna give the movie a bit of a pass for that, even though it does feel like it's a direct copy of the ending of Rocky, which in marathon viewings of this franchise, like I usually do, doesn't really hold up as well in the year 2023, but you know what? I still enjoy watching it again because it's the ending to the first Rocky movie. And I think it's directed really well. The opening sequence of the ambulance ride through Philadelphia is really well helmed. The boxing sequence at the end is so freaking intense. The character motivations are all there. The reason for Rocky wanting to fight this time are perfectly valid, and it all feels earned. Burgess Meredith is once again incredibly hilarious as Mickey, and he also has the right amount of dramatic tones thrown in there. But yeah, Burgess Meredith was certainly a character. The reason Apollo Creed losing, pretty much him beating himself and going for the knockout, and basically not only trying to retain his title, but his reputation. Guys, I really don't know what else to say. Rocky 2, I think, is one of the greatest cinematic sequels of all time. Not just because it's a very entertaining movie that's extremely well directed and well edited, but it does everything that you want a sequel to do, and it passes with flying colors. It builds on the success of the original, and it builds on what we already know about these characters, and it amplifies the stakes to 100. Guys, I love this movie. This is one of my personal favorites in the franchise. You can certainly see why it's a favorite of my parents, for sure. And guys, you can nitpick it all you want. You can say that the second act meanders a little bit. You can say that the opening of the movie is basically just a repeat. But I'm not going to let that downgrade my enjoyment of Rocky 2 for anything. I'm going to give Rocky 2 an A+. And yes, I understand, that grade might be completely nostalgia driven, but these are my opinions, and this is my video, so you can do with that what you will. But let me know what you thought of Rocky 2 down in the comments section below. I'm actually very curious to see what you guys think about this. Do you guys think that this is one of the mid-entries in the franchise? Do you also think this is one of the greatest sequels ever made? Guys, it's so much fun bringing you this content and discussing all new things in movies and entertainment. So if you're a new viewer, do consider becoming a subscriber and hit that notification bell as well. That way you don't miss another second of the fun action over here. And hit that thumbs up as well. Really helps continue to grow this amazing community that we've already built here. Guys, y'all are the best. Keep loving the movies and keep talking about movies. I absolutely am so grateful for your guys' support. Look out for more reviews very soon. And with all that being said, back talk, commence!